A white police officer kills an unarmed black teenager in Ferguson, Missouri. In a town of 21,000, blacks make up 63% of the population but account for over 90% of the arrests. Furthermore, the Ferguson Police Department has only 3 black officers out of a force of 53. The question arises, does the criminal justice system discriminate against African Americans? This is the ASU Democrats versus Republicans. My name is Nihal Krishan. I'm a senior at ASU studying political science and broadcast journalism. We're currently filming at the Cronkite building at ASU's downtown campus. Joining me today are, on my left, Michael Martinez, National Chair of the Young Democrats of America College Caucus, and a political science graduate from ASU.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And on my right, Carlos Alfaro, former ASU College Republicans president and an economics and history major. Thanks for having me, Carlos. Topic of today's debate is the Ferguson shooting and the criminal justice system in America. The Pew Research Center says 68% of Democrats think the Ferguson shooting raises an important issue about race that merits a discussion. Among Republicans, 61% say the issue of race has gotten too much attention, while only 22% say the case has raised important racial issues that need to be discussed. The reverse is at hand with Democrats, who think 68% of whom think the Ferguson shooting raises important issues about race that merit discussion. In a town that's deeply divided by race for many years, with a clear disparity between the racial makeup of the police and the community in Ferguson, why would Republicans not think this is a serious issue regarding race to be discussed? Carlos?
Well, thank you so much for having this debate. I think that those statistics sometimes can tell a different story than what is out there. Republicans do think there are very important issues that we should be discussing, things like police militarization. Does government have the power to take over your town, and even if you're protesting peacefully, to use weapons against you, military weapons against you? There's the welfare state. Are these communities trapped in poverty because of programs that seek to help but just keep people down? And last one, our largest prison population. The U.S. has the largest prison population in the world, even if for number per capita or total number of inmates. These are completely rational issues to talk about, and they're very important. But unfortunately, the left and some of the media has muddled this issue by going straight away into assumptions and conversations that are not helpful. It does two things. The evidence pointing to the assault or this tragic thing that happened, the police officer had the right to defend himself, and two, that these topics of race are used by the left and by the media to separate, to spread hate, and to not lead to any helpful conversation.
So we'll talk more about the media later, but do you have any sort of explanation or justification for why Republicans do not think that this incident is worthy of a conversation or discussion on race? Why do you think that Democrats and Republicans are so polarized in terms of their opinions on this, when it does seem, at least in this case, that there are clear racial problems and barriers that need to be discussed?
Definitely, it's racial, but it's also the relationship between government and the person. It's not just about the black community. It's not just about the poor community. It's about our society as a whole. What does a free society look like? And the difference between Democrats and Republicans is that this is a case that is a horrible example if you want to talk about race and society. This case doesn't give you real facts. What it does is that
what I have difficulty understanding is why do you think Democrats look at this issue so differently? This is not a matter of like 2% or 5%. It's almost like black and white. Democrats overwhelmingly think that this shows that we need to continue to have a conversation on race, whereas Republicans overwhelmingly think that this is just being blown up and, it's just victimizing, this.
But we're talking about one single issue, and this single issue led to more than a dozen businesses to be vandalized. It led to 30 people being arrested, more than 30 people, and 2 police officers suffered injuries during these riots. Yes, there's something to talk about, but when you use this specific situation and you take it all in, you'll see that this is a bad example. If we wanted to discuss these important racial issues, we shouldn't be doing it by vandalizing streets, by having this whole racial war on the media.
But bottom line is, do you have any explanation for the fact that Republicans don't think this is worthy of, like, you represent the Republican community. Why do you think it is that they do not think this is worthy of a conversation on race?
Because
why is that?
I think that...
Is there any rational reason for that?
What this led to was riots and businesses getting vandalized. That's why I'm opposed to using this as an example to say that, to have any meaningful conversation. If you want to talk about meaningful conversation, we should talk about the prison population, decriminalization or demilitarization of the police and the welfare state, not just about the riots that happen.
He's right about those. Those are also things we need to have conversations about. I agree. But to say that race, this doesn't, have anything to do with race, I think that's just an unjustified statement. Obviously, there are a lot of citizens in Ferguson who think differently. You saw the stats here. I mean, the African American population, which is the majority in Ferguson, are underrepresented in the police force and in the government. There's obviously they feel that they're not being listened to, that their voice isn't being heard. They didn't riot. Let's put that out there too. They didn't riot. There was peaceful protests. Now there was looting. And shops were looted, but there's always going to be a criminal element that's going to take advantage of a situation.
I'm sorry, but from the mouths of the people that were out there, without the looting, there would be no attention. This just shows that it's not about issues. It's not about what's affecting our American cities. It's that they want to protest in a violent way, and this is why this is a horrible example. If we want to have a meaningful discussion, we come to the table and we talk about it. We don't riot and loot businesses.
So you think the only reason we're talking about this is because of the looting and rioting and nothing to do with the fact that an unarmed black teenager was shot by a white police officer? You think it has nothing to do with that?
It has everything to do with it, but I'm saying that it's a horrible example. The police officer had completely justified purposes for doing what he did.
I disagree, because maybe I would say the police officer had a right to defend himself, but the way he shot him at the end, like Mike Brown had given himself up. He had his hands up in the air and was no longer a threat to the police officer, and yet the police officer kept shooting. That's not a justified killing.
What I'm saying is we have to look at all the facts, and that is that we have autopsies that show that the shots were from the front
and the back,
and that he was pointing towards the police officer's cars when he fell. And that means that he was assaulting a police officer. It's never smart, and we should never say that anybody's justified in assaulting police.
I don't think that you should assault a police officer. That's hands down. You just can't do that, okay? But the police officer also had other means to kind of to gain control of the situation. He's been trained to gain control of the situation without the use of deadly force. Okay, but none of that was used. Now we can't. It's hard to say what we're not police officers, right? Obviously, so it's hard to say what it's hard to dictate what should have happened in that type of situation. But the fact of the matter is that the extreme force was used after Mike Brown had given up. Is that? Would you agree that?
Also after he had assaulted a police officer.
But would you agree that that the facts do show that he had raised his hands? He said, "Enough, I'm done." And
I don't think the facts will show that of what he said when he got shot or what actually happened. What we do have is the fact
the witness. I'm sorry, no, but the witnesses would say otherwise.
Okay.
All right, guys. Let's go back to discussing the differences between Democrats and Republicans on this issue. So, along the same lines, Michael, what do you think it is about Democratic political ideology or the way the Democrats look at the world in America today that enables them to want to have a conversation about race after this incident? What do you think makes them so different in their thinking and views compared to Republicans?
I think that we have to have a conversation about race because there's this view that seems to be sweeping over the Republican Party that racism is dead. We elected an African American president. It's gone. We don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's not. I would almost go so far as saying that the Republican Party has institutionalized racism from the top all the way to the bottom. So it's hard to say that it's that African Americans in places like Ferguson, where shooting like this has happened, where that they shouldn't get ticked off about it because there's no accountability. There's none.
So as a Democrat, why do you think that race did play a role in this event?
Well, in this particular event, it's as Carlos said earlier, it's kind of hard to say whether or not in the actual shooting, if race if race had something to do with it. What the protest afterwards, and what happened afterwards, that definitely had race.
Or why don't we just talk about the St. Louis County overall? Do you think race plays a role in the county and how laws are enforced there, particularly in regards to the police and the criminal justice system?
You know, if it's anything to do with like Arizona, then yeah. and you know that St. Louis does have I would say a higher crime rate and a higher population of African Americans. So, I mean, if it has any similarities to Arizona, then yes, race does play an issue, and we can look at things like SB 1070, where race plays a huge. And Andrew Thomas, in his run for gubernatorial nomination, we see this Mexican flag in his ad with a huge circle and cross through it. Like, obviously, race is playing an issue, is a huge issue, and on all levels of the government right now. And because of that, I think me, and along with many other Democrats, and I don't even think it's Democrats, I think independents, even some Republicans would say the same thing, it's time to have a civil discussion about race in America and figure out how we can come together as one and have everybody's voice heard so people don't feel oppressed.
But I completely agree with that.
We need to have that conversation.
We're talking about one incident, and that was the Michael Brown shooting. And already we have gotten off the topic because we're not talking about it anymore. We're talking about laws that lead to minorities being arrested more often. We can talk about the drug war, we can talk about police militarization. There are laws, because of this drug war that the big government is trying to push, that there are laws that target minorities disproportionately from white Americans. And we can talk about those, but this is a horrible example because it has nothing to do with the Michael Brown case.
So you think that most Republicans think it's a conversation worth having, but not due to this event?
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
I think we see a perfect example of how Democrats use isolated tragedies to win political points and not talk about real issues.
Great. We're gonna move on. You've been on the hot seat for a little bit. We're gonna move the hot seat over to our Democrat Michael now. So apparently civil rights activists like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton have been using the protests in Ferguson over the deaths of Mike Brown to convince local residents to register to vote. This doesn't sit well with the executive director of the Missouri Republican Party, Matt Wills, and the state's GOP. When contacted by Breitbart to give an opinion on this, Wills said the following: "If that's not fanning the political flames, I don't know what is. I think it's not only disgusting, but completely inappropriate." What do you have to say about this, and the fact that Democrats are supposedly using the Michael Brown shooting to register voters and using his death to rally the black community and get more Democrats to the polls for midterms?
Well, okay, so I ask why. Why would he say something like that? So I don't know. I don't understand. Like, you get mad when African Americans take to the streets to protest, and then you get mad when they're trying to use their civil rights to protest. Like, what do you expect them to do? They want their voice to be heard, just like any one of us. We want our voice to be heard. Now, Democrats are obviously going to target African Americans just like they're targeting Latinos. They're part of the rising American electorate. They're minorities, youth, and single women. These are the groups that do not show up to the polls, and they're disproportionately misrepresented in government. So of course they're going to try.
But I think the problem that people like Mr. Wills have with this is using the death of a young black man to further the party's causes and try to get people out to vote. I mean, that to me, it does seem like it's kind of a boring, the fact that a young black man has died and use that for their own political advantage.
I didn't see it that way. I saw it as them registering voters. Like, that's what I do right now is registering voters. I'm going to use any means necessary to register votes. But that's not the reason why he was so mad about it. The reason he's so mad about it is because minorities vote Democrat 80% or higher. That's why they don't want those people to be registered to vote. It's not because, oh, this is you're fanning. It's because they don't want them to vote. That's the issue. And that's why the Republican Party has taken a stance of voter suppression, because they don't want Democratic voters to vote. because they know once minorities show up to the polls, once single women show up to the polls, once college students show up to the polls, we are going to be a liberal country and not one that is being.
Well, I'm happy you brought that up because actually the statistics in the last couple of years have been showing that less people, especially less Latinos and less Latinos, have been registering as independents rather than Democrats. Yes, they're registering, they're voting for Democrats, but they're registering as independents because they've seen the failure of this Democrat-run administration, of their policies. They are using antiquated thoughts like the welfare state that has been in place since 1964 with trillions of dollars spent, hundreds of programs. It's not working, and thank God that minorities are waking up to this because they are going to become the majority in the next couple of decades.
Yeah, it's true, but the fact is, it's in Arizona they're registering as Democrats as a majority of Arizonans, not just minorities. The majority of Arizonans register as independents, but minorities are still voting 80%.
Going back to Democrats using this to get voters out, Carlos, correct me if I'm wrong, but the impression is that Republicans have a problem with Democrats getting people out to vote right now because they were not doing it before this incident, and if this incident hadn't happened, they would not have done this until maybe closer to the midterms. And I think the problem is have all these black people are out in Ferguson rioting, protesting, and it's to a certain extent they're taking advantage of the fact that they're all congregated and trying to get, and knowing that all of those individuals are likely to vote Democratic. And so it's, in a sense, it's like taking advantage of a very tragic situation for their personal benefit, rather than maybe they could wait 2 or 3 weeks, wait for everything to calm down, and then go and register people to vote. But this is kind of like right in the spur of the moment. How can we use this incident to benefit us? Let's go and get our voters. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, definitely, and they've been using that same strategy. They say we care about the poor, we care about minorities, but what ends up happening is that once they get elected, once they get the power, they enact policies that make more bureaucracy and spend more of our money. We've been spending close to $1 trillion a year, according to the Cato Institute, close to $1 trillion a year with over 126 different programs targeting poverty. Yet the poverty rate has not decreased. People are in these communities, like you said, are underrepresented because we've punished them when they start working. Our welfare system is set up that when you start working, all your benefits are dropped. We need welfare reform and not just pandering and saying and promising new programs.
I agree with that, but we're going to talk about poverty again. 4%, we talked about this before. 4% is 12 million people. We're keeping 12 million people out of poverty. Like, that's good. We should be spending.
It's not good.
It's not good because obviously. What cost? What cost?
The cost that there's almost 70% of people in Ferguson that are African American, Black Americans, and they are still not represented in their community. They are still not engaging as citizens. Correct. But more importantly, they're not becoming wealthy. This country's built on wealth. This country's built on capitalism, and we're not providing that for them. What we're giving them is dependency, generation after generation. We're not keeping them out of poverty. We're keeping them in the cycle of poverty.
How do we change the fact that they don't have a voice?
Welfare reform. When you start depending less on the politicians that promise you things and more on yourself, and when you start opening up businesses, you start seeing a change in civic engagement.
Okay. So you don't think registering them to vote gives them a voice?
Definitely, but not using a tragic event to do
so. Michael,
it's not just a tragic event. It's an event in general. I'm sorry, no, it's an event in general. It could have been a concert, and people would show up to register people to vote.
But the fact that you're comparing a tragic event where a person died to a concert shows the Democrat mentality of it's all a political opportunity. Anything that will increase our political power is good. We can change this scenario.
Bottom line is, do you genuinely think the Democrats had people's best interests and trying to increase political participation at their heart, or do you think there was any element of trying to take advantage of the situation to benefit their own and improve their own chances of getting elected?
I'm not in their heads, but the way I'm looking at it is, if you are truly upset with the system right now, if you're truly feeling underrepresented in your city, where most of the elected officials are white and most of the population is African American, the way we solve that is not to loot, is not to go out and start riots, is to register to vote and show up in the polls in November. That's how we solve the issue.
I'm sorry, but that's not it. You're saying that more government and more civic engagement will get us to a place. If we just all vote for our leaders, everything will be better. But I'm sorry, but we've elected leaders in Arizona. We've elected leaders at the federal level. They were using militarized weapons like the MRAP, designed to withstand landmines. These are tanks. And if it's not just happening in other communities, here in our community, Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio has lost 20 militarized rifles from a federal program that was given to them. They gave them 200 weapons, a Hummer, a tank, and 3 helicopters. These are our representatives. These are the people that vote and do it. Government is not the answer. Voting is not the answer. It's resisting that government power.
It's hard for me to
Thank you, Carlos. I think this is a great bridge to our next topic, which is that there are a few senators who are actually finding bipartisanship and being pissed off about police militarization, including Claire McCaskill, who is a Democrat from Missouri, Senator Tom Coburn, a Republican from Oklahoma, and then Rand Paul, potential presidential candidate from Kentucky. What do you guys think about the fact that police militarization seems to be one thing that we can all agree is having a negative impact on societies and communities, and that Democrats and Republicans are actually coming together on this issue and trying to drastically reduce this? Like, what do you think about this?
I think it's
as something to come together on, Carlos?
It's fantastic. I do want to say that Senator Rand Paul has spoke about demilitarizing the police a whole 2 weeks before the president even talked about it. Because again, we're always looking for the political gain. Politicians are always looking for more bureaucracy to enact. So yeah, this is great that we can come together to decrease. I want to make this very sure. We are coming together to decrease government's power, take away their weapons, demilitarize the police, so that then the citizen can be empowered. And this can happen in economics, it can happen in healthcare, it can happen everywhere. If we just decrease the control from the
why do you
centralized
think this
state.
is one of few rare issues where Democrats and Republicans actually have some sort of concurrent? Why do you think that is? What makes this so special as an issue?
We both believe in the American ideal of American freedom, and we want this to look like a free society. We want the cops to protect us, not to target us. And again, it goes into other things. We don't want our communities to be dependent. That's not for a free society. We don't want the largest prison population in the world. That goes against a free society. But it's coming from government, not from the people.
That's funny you say that, because it's also coming from private prisons. But that's, I guess, maybe a different story that we can talk about. Quotas in private prisons, mandatory sentencing. We can talk about that too.
But Michael, what do you think about why Democrats and Republicans appearingly are kissing each other's asses over this topic?
So, I mean, it's true. I mean, our neighborhoods are not war zones, and those who are sworn to protect us should not be treating us like war enemies. This is our neighborhoods. It's not Afghanistan. It's not Iraq. We're not ISIS. We shouldn't be treated as such. So, I think that's why we can agree. I think maybe we differ on how far we should demilitarize. I would say that some Republicans would like to privatize our public safety, which I think is ridiculous because it takes away accountability. But also the fact is we don't have a level of accountability that we should have now. We should have, I would say, a private, independent committee reviewing these types of situations like Mike Brown. So it's not cops investigating cops. Because the police are a brotherhood, just like firefighters, just like the Army. I'm not going to say that they would do anything to protect their own, but to save that from happening, we should have an independent commission reviewing cases like this.
We can't trust it. We can't trust government. I'm sorry, they can't run a budget. They can't run a healthcare system. They can't run our safety.
Independent. Like, I'm not saying government ran. I'm saying an independent commission, probably of like citizens or people who know how to conduct an investigation, but that are not tied to a police force.
Okay, we had a quick minute of bipartisanship, and we're back to our partisanship all over again. So our last question of the debate is: statistics on the African American community show majority of those arrested across the country are black. 40% of those arrested in America are black, but they only make up 14% of the actual population. Is this due to police injustice and the way our criminal justice system is set up, or do African Americans legitimately cause more crimes? We'll start with you, Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, no, this is a huge problem in American society where we have minorities getting targeted by our laws, minorities getting affected by our economic policies, and this is something that is government caused. We have to always look to the government and see what they're doing. For example,
So you don't think compared to other races, on average, African Americans are committing more crimes?
No, and the war on drugs is perfect on there.
Asians?
There's the same rate of black Americans do drugs or get caught for drugs as white Americans do, yet more black Americans end up in prison. More Hispanics end up in prison. And the reason is because those laws are meant to target the poor. They're meant to target the middle class. The rich, middle class to rich might be okay, but these laws, these bad laws and bad government inefficiencies hurt the guy at the bottom, not the guy at the top.
So people like, the 61% of Republicans who don't think that this Michael Brown shooting is worthy of having a conversation on race, many of them also do legitimately think that maybe because of culture, maybe because of the fact that they've been suppressed and are economically are more economically challenged than other races, that African Americans do commit more crimes on average compared to other races. What would you have to say for Republicans who hold that viewpoint?
I just think that we should, instead of blaming people, we should blame the bureaucrats and the politicians that have put those laws that target people.
So you think they're missing?
Yeah, we believe in small government. We believe in that government is inefficient to provide things in society, and that's why we need less of it, and we need the free market to provide that. That's the cause. It's politicians and bureaucrats, not the people.
And so you would not agree with Republicans who say that African Americans do commit more
Correct.
crimes on
It's
average
inconsistent with our core beliefs.
Misinformation. That's borderline racist, but that's another story. But I mean,
what do you think? Do you think it's because of the way our criminal justice system is set up, or do you think that there is any sort of leg to stand on for people who say that African Americans commit more crimes?
No, there's no leg to stand on. There's not. Police officers patrol impoverished neighborhoods more than they do affluent neighborhoods. You don't. I can't. When I lived in North Scottsdale, I don't remember ever seeing a cop, ever. I got as long as I lived there, it was like 2 years. I never saw a squad car patrolling the area. In Mesa, see it all the time. You know what I mean? Like because there's. They're patrolling the impoverished neighborhoods more often. I don't think the free market is what's going to solve that. I don't know if that really has a lot to do with it. But what does have to do with it is laws that do adversely affect minorities than they do whites. And a perfect example was crack compared to cocaine. It's basically the same drug, but crack was considered a higher danger.
So why do you think our criminal justice system has been structured and created to marginalize African Americans? Why do you think that?
That's not just African Americans; it's minorities in general.
What do you think is the cause or reason?
Yeah, it's the lower end of the economy. Maybe it's minorities in general and those who are not affluent. You know what? It's
of course, but I got to make something very clear. It has everything to do with it. These laws empower police officers to arrest people, pull them over, and have an excuse to arrest them and have a larger prison population. We need to get rid of these laws. What we need is deregulation of what we can put into our bodies, deregulation and end to programs that are enslaving our communities like welfare.
To an extent.
Okay, I think unfortunately that's all we have enough time for today. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next Democrats versus Republicans debate. This is Nihal Krishan signing off from the Cronkite School.